Everybody, and thank you very much. What I want to do today in a short presentation really is put today's launch in the context of our work in relation to the RESUS, which was published back in January 2020. So we've had a good 3 years now nearly of implementation. So the Smart Southern Region is a kind of key enabler of our work in relation to that. So next slide, please. Okay, just the basic perspective of where we're coming from is the National Planning Framework and Project Ireland 2040. I think that sets the overall structure of where we're at in terms of overall spatial and economic planning for the country. And when you boil it down, it's quite a simple but radical document. It talks about a structural realignment for the overall betterment of our society, of population, homes and jobs away from the Greater Dublin area with a 50-50 split of growth between the Eastern Midlands region and the Southern and Western region, and the Northern and Western region and the Southern region. So, like, that's a very tangible spatial planning objective of numbers. It speaks to infrastructure and the rest of it. But it also comes at a time where the enablers for those changes have to be more than just building houses, more than just providing infrastructure. It's also about a change in the nature, in the way we do our work and the way our alignment of our communities. When you bring that down to the Southern region, we're talking about an extra 400,000 population with very significant growth targeted in our metropolitan areas. And again, that's all set in the context of the whole climate change agenda. So when you untangle that, that's just a really radical and massive change that needs commitment, but it also needs enablers to undertake that change. So anyway, that is our, I suppose, our writing instructions for the region about what our job is, and then that filters down to the local level. And I suppose as part of today and being very useful, and I pointed to it as a part of the documentation for the event, is our 2-year report, where we take a sober look at what successes we've had, what challenges we've had, and some warnings for the future, and where the possibilities are. And again, the Smart Region fits very well as an enabler in that. Next slide, please. So back in 2020, when we had something like 300 objectives in the RESUS, and our task in terms of implementation, given the resources we had and our obligations, we filtered that down to 32 specific actions. Many of those related to governance, what changes were made in the structural nature of the organization. I'll talk about that. A key, and probably most of the work we had to do, related to engagement with local authorities on the statutory development plan process, which was being undertaken at the time and is pretty much done. The Clare plan is nearly across the line, and that then is the last of the 10. And then we had our specific regional initiatives, including transformative regional initiatives, and I'll talk about those as well, and also regional strategies. Next slide, please. Yeah, a key strategy for us, and one that is not yet successful, and the SMART feeds into this as well, was in relation to MASP implementation. Key component of the RESUS was metropolitan area strategic plans, which are set a structure for the 3 metropolitan areas in the region: Cork, Limerick, Shannon and Waterford. And this is very important in terms of the Southern region, because a characteristic of our region is that we have 3 of the 5 cities in the state. So this is very important. I suppose what an innovative part, there's two aspects of this were innovative. Firstly, the development of statutory metropolitan area strategic plans for the first time. Secondly, then, as part of that, and given the targets within the MPF that our 3 metropolitan areas are to grow by 50+% in 20 years, extraordinary target. That's 50% of the population compared in 20 years compared to all of history. So we put forward a number of proposals structurally how that should happen. And we're pushing that agenda with the local authorities and at national level. And we put that forward. But SMART plays an important role in that. I wouldn't say we have been successful yet, but this is a key process. And again, that's in our 2-year report. Next slide, please. Okay, we're kind of moving on. I'll move quickly through these. This sets the context of what we call transformative initiatives that we've undertaken that are not directly spatial related in terms of statutory planning, but enable the implementation. Key to this is the development of a regional development monitor by the 3 assemblies. This, and Alice will talk in more detail about this, but it's a platform that hosts a range of information in relation to the implementation of the RESAs, publicly available and of use to citizens, local authorities, particularly in the context of the LECPs. And that provides, again, it's highly innovative, and it provides a platform for the overall monitoring of the RESAs. Next slide, please. Okay, towards the learning region. Again, like the SMART region, this is one where we have to think outside the box of what actually will enable the development of the region outside of nuts and bolts of infrastructure provision. And a key to that was learning and change in understanding of the human capital. So again, I'll refer that's available on our website and will be available through the platform here of, I suppose, a radical proposal for changing the nature of learning in the region. Next slide, please. Yeah, another key initiative that we've undertaken was blue-green infrastructure and nature-based solution framework for the southern region. Again, highly innovative. There's 2 key elements to this. Firstly, there's a framework document that sets out how you develop blue-green nature-based solutions. Infrastructure, again, there's a SMART angle to this as well. And that provides a framework document for local authorities and others to develop that. Secondly, and again, this feeds into the nature of the work we undertake and the nature of the work that will be undertaken with SMART region. We've set up a network with local authorities and others in order to increase the knowledge base in relation to these areas, because a lot of what we talk about are new initiatives, and there may be particular individuals in local authorities, but often they work in silos, etc. So we need to upskill across organizations in relation to that. Again, our role here is largely as a catalyst, where the people are there that have the skills for this, but we through our work we bring this together by providing a framework, but also by getting people to work together. Next slide, please. Yeah, Rob Fennelly will talk about this. Again, a transformative initiative we've undertaken in relation to the whole sustainable mobility field. We did a lot of background work in relation to 10-minute towns. Again, there's a SMART angle to this, and it feeds into our whole sustainable transport agenda. Again, I suppose it's important to point out, and this feeds into a lot of what we do. We're not the national providers of this in relation to transport, neither are we in relation to other initiatives. But we can and do link, I think, very well between the national and the local. And for example, the key one here is the Pathfinder program, which the Southern Region developed on behalf of the 3 assemblies. That again, like the blue-green, is a program that will be rolled out in the coming months, that on raising understanding of the whole sustainable mobility initiative, and upskilling within local authorities and others in that area into away from traditional practices. Next slide, please. The Smart Region Framework and S3 is what we're here about today, so I won't dwell on this. But just to say, from our perspective, to bring it back to the whole RESIS and the National Planning Framework, its key role, I think, as a non-specialist in this area, is weaving a whole lot of this together and linking it up. And again, there are initiatives there. It's about, like in the other slides I had there, it's about upskilling and raising awareness in relation to these initiatives. Next slide, please. Okay, I just want to have just some reflections on our view of the world, about where we're at 2 years down in terms of the implementation of the RESIS, and in terms of implementation National Planning Framework, in terms of the work we've done. And again, I suppose these aren't criticisms as such, they're just, I suppose, our view of the world and where things might move. I suppose I'll talk about a few positives. Firstly, through the work in the last 2 years of the local authorities, previous to that ourselves, and then the NPF, you could say at a national level, there is now substantial policy alignment across a huge area in terms of statutory planning, but also broader economic development, more than there ever was before. And that shouldn't be taken lightly. That took a lot of hard work at national level, regional level, and at local level. And the benefits of that, I think, will be seen over the coming years, and it can be underplayed. But firstly, that we can bank that, I think, as in overall terms a success. Secondly, I suppose, notwithstanding the fact that there is always a need for more investment, and there is clearly a need for particular structural investment to enable the radical change required by the NPF. Notwithstanding that, there has been huge investment by public bodies over the last number of years to address a range of initiatives. I'll come back to some criticism to that, but I suppose the starting off point is that Ireland's investment level is at the top end in terms of EU investment. So that is a positive. I think in terms of our own work, and I've outlined there's been significant initiatives by the Southern Regional Assembly in relation to implementation, transformative initiatives that will find their way through the Regional Development Monitor, the MASP implementation proposals. I think we've moved the agenda ahead there. The Learning Region Initiative, Smart Southern Region, Regional Sustainability, Blue-Green Infrastructure as well. So I think they're positives. Next slide, please. Challenges. I think the overall, the National Planning Framework, as I say, is quite a radical document and has huge targets. So it's about change in the spatial layout of the country, change in the way we go about our work and the way our society is organized. And I don't think that is actually being fully appreciated. But the challenges to that, the key one from our perspective, is the shift in growth from the Eastern Midlands region to the Southern region. You would say that at this early stage, and again, it's important to note that the trajectory of growth to the Dublin region is still falling through, and our early results from the census point to that. So that change is, there is signs of growth in our region, but there's still signs of even more growth in the Dublin region, and there's signs that now within the Dublin region that is now causing huge problems as well. So you could say that the actual overall aim of the MPF and the RESIS and in a national level, there are strong concerns about that. And that concern is in two senses. One, the sheer fact of warning signs of success, but also, I think, more importantly, from our point of view, a danger that there then will be mission creep in terms of the national space, the MPF itself, and a realignment of it to reflect the reality of what's happening on the ground. The other challenge is, as I say, there is significant investment, but is that investment structured in a way that is successful? Much of it is competitive investment. We think there should be a long-term budgeting mechanism for local authorities and our metropolitan areas to achieve the targets. And the last few points, I think, relate to the SMART theme in terms of, are we ready in terms of what are the actual factors that successfully enable the change? Can regions and others play a more successful role? It seems to me it's much more than about investment. And to date, we're following, I suppose, a traditional route. And is there changes in structures and practices and procedures across the state that can enable the change in the MPF to happen in a more successful way, more effective way? And I think, again, I'm not an expert on this, but I do feel that the whole SMART agenda can play a key role in that it seems to me everything doesn't need to be in a hierarchical sense, flowing downwards, that there is the potential for local initiatives and facilitating those that can assist this agenda. Next slide, please. Yeah, in terms of that last point I made and where we're at, and in terms of our role, this slide shows some of the manifestations of regional governance in Ireland. I could have put up at least 8 more slides. So the point being that in a European context, regionalism in Ireland is quite undeveloped. Most public bodies and most government departments have their own regional manifestations, and they don't align, or very often don't align. So I just put that is that's a factor, and I think that needs to be looked at, not in terms of, I suppose, a proprietorial sense, but in terms of how we can best effectively affect the change of the MPF. And it seems to me that this isn't really being looked at in any considered sense. And it is a point that is we raise as part of the RESIS implementation. Next slide, please. Yeah, finally, again, this is set in the broader context, but does feed into the overall smart region agenda. I think we need clear mechanisms should be applied to ensure that the population employment growth in the southern region and northwest should at least match that of the EMRA, the 50-50 split. We can't lose sight of that. And by using enablers such as Smart Region are part of our toolkit to achieve that. Going back to the point I made earlier, the evidence of a drift or lack of achievement at this early stage in the MPF and the RESIS should not be used as a basis to undermine Project Ireland 2040. I think there's a clear need for local authorities, for the regional assemblies, and for the wider society to keep the eye on that ball, because it's quite easy that it's in the nature of policies and programs that there's drift, and that we need to keep that pressure on. And again, coming up for proactive initiatives like we have today are part of the toolkit of that. In relation to the mass, we come back to that. The whole recess is about the metropolitan areas and the rural together, but our rural areas don't work successfully if it all needs to work successfully. There's a gap there, and in terms of the mass, given their targeted growth, and we consider this as a priority. We have come up with innovative proposals there, and we'll keep pushing this, because it is a gap that is there in relation to the metropolitan areas. Again, not being overly critical in terms of in terms of the initiative we've undertaken, in terms of government policies, in terms of the local authority work, there are now significant policy instruments in place. So much of the work should focus, we think, on actually getting on with implementation. In my experience, there's nothing more. There's a tendency within public bodies and local authorities and others to, there's nothing people like more than doing a new plan. I think there should be a time where things settle, and the focus should be much more on implementation. Again, coming back to the point I made from our perspective, the next focus in terms of the NPF as it matures, and again, we are at the early stages, is part of that is in terms of implementation, and that the negative impacts of a multiplicity of bodies with overlapping mandates should be addressed. And we in Southern Region should play our role as that, as a proactive agent for government. So I just like to say thank you. And again, as I say, my role was to put a broader structure on it, but I do think that the smart region is key to this in terms of weaving the whole thing together as a part of that toolkit. And so I look forward to hearing the other speakers. So thank you very much.